The first thing I remember is that I went with my grandfather and my dad, and still in the same building where we're at now, and all the older gentlemen were sitting around there eating popcorn around the big table, and I thought that was the greatest thing on earth to go in there. That was big time, to go to the elevator and sit in the big table and eat popcorn and just listen to the stories.
My father would plant corn with 2 horses, and he would fill the planter boxes with a half a bushel of seed, and then put his bag of seed on the seat and go out to the field and plant, and I'd sit on the end on that bag of seed and watch. And now, my gosh, we fill a planter and it's good to go for 120, 30 acres. My father, if he got 12 acres planted between the time he milked cows in the morning and night, he had a pretty good day.
I grew up in the Milford area. I went to Milford grade school. My dad had a hardware store and a small livestock farm that had been in the family for, well, we've had it for over 100 years. Had a neighbor named Delbert Bouchou, and he was looking for somebody to help him, and so I traded my labor for some of his machinery to get started. Back then, we thought a 180 bushel wagon was a big wagon. We'd pull 2 of those with the old 40-20. I'd take those down to Goodwine to the elevator.
They put up a lot of bins. After the corn got yielded more, they got semi-trucks now, all of that with. Then they had to make bigger scales to get the semis on.
When you see the trucks going down the road, you know that'd be a lot of wagons. I used to stand in the window and watch early in the morning. They would line up with their wagons to unload way before daylight. Now the trucks whip in and unload and they're gone.
I can just barely remember when he was still farming actively with my dad, and I'd be a little shaver going out there to help him and everything. But when I started, it was even, we had 6-row equipment, and now it's 16 or 24, and just the massive size of the tractors and the combines, and doing 2 rows at a time. Now you do 8 to 12, and the same with the elevator, just larger bins. Before we had a lot of small bins that we filled. It comes in so fast, you need bigger legs and bigger bins and everything to handle it better for everybody.
1977, when I was still living on the Milford farm, Harold Hofer, another good neighbor, came along, and he was looking for somebody to drive a truck. And I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, well, you'll go down to the elevator and haul grain. So I spent a lot of time hauling grain out of Goodwine elevator to the grain terminals, Champaign, Decatur, Danville, along with Gibson City, Lafayette, Indiana. And met Jim Knake down there. I'd known him before, but he was the manager.
I grew up in the country near the Bryce elevator. My dad actually hauled grain into that elevator. I did myself as a kid. Actually, I met my wife right across the street from the Goodwine elevator office. I've worked there since 1978.
We went on a foreign market where, when I first was the director, where everything we grew around here went to the Arkansas chicken farmers. Well, now we're shipping it globally.
It's interesting, some of our corn will actually go to Indiana to be used for ethanol. And then the byproducts, which they call DDGs, will be taken up into the Joliet, Chicago area, loaded on containers, taken to the West Coast, taken across the ocean to Asia, where they'll use it to feed all kinds of things, in some cases fish. Those fish are then frozen, shipped back across the ocean, and end up in our grocery stores around here. So some of that corn goes a long ways. We've
had a lot of the same board members, some great people to work with over the past years. Some of them are retired now, but we've always had a good board that has always got along very well. And having one person in management for as many years we've had has also been a great attribute to this company. It's just made us very stable.
There were many changes. I mean, we went from legs that did 1,700 bushel an hour to legs that do upwards of 15,000 an hour. And our legs were only less than 100 foot high, and now they're 140 foot high. And I can remember when, we had 30-foot scales and then 60-foot scales, and now we got 140-foot scales that'll weigh upwards of 120,000 pounds. In the old days, weigh a 60,000 pound scale was plenty, but it won't do the job now.
I guess the ability to handle larger amounts of grain during the harvest window is the biggest thing. We sure want to take care of the farmers. That's the advantage of a farmer co-op, is we all know what it takes to get the job done, and if we need to spend some money on updating equipment, we try to do it responsibly.
I was a treasurer for a while, and I think it's, it kind of scared you to give a line of credit for $1 million. And I think before I left, I was signing them for like $4 million. And I think the other day they were telling me that they had to have a $14 million line of credit. So this is what has really changed in the elevator business, your volume and your amounts.
Probably the internet has done as much as anything. We'll trade, $1 million worth of grain using emails. We'll never even talk to the person. And you can go back and forth with your negotiations, talk about the size of the sale and grades and all these different things in just a matter of minutes using the internet.
Just like farming, the technology has changed, tremendously in that. Computers more at use, and everything is done by computer. Just like technology we have in farming, where the GPS now, where you don't even steer a lot of the equipment, and the elevators the same way. And in fact, we've been working on things to, they could run legs and everything from the office possibly in the future. And it's just, technology has changed tremendously, and I suppose for the better, as long as it all works.
The grain elevator is typically the tallest thing in the area. And in fact, in a lot of our elevators over the years, we've put up Christmas decorations, stars or whatever, and I know some people have commented that they know they're home when they can see the Goodwine star or the Lonzo star or whatever it might be. And
I never go down the road that I don't look over and see the elevator. That is our guiding point to the house and to the farm. It is part of being home.
My ground adjoins the elevator, so from my house I can see the elevator. I've seen the changes that it's made in many years. And even my grandkids, when we come home and they're in the car, they know we're close to home. They'll all say, "Grandpa, there's the elevator." So it's a great landmark to have, and the improvements we've made, it really makes you feel proud to be a part of this organization. Honesty and discipline still come into effect a lot in farming. You're your own boss, and if you didn't, some days you may have to work 16, 18 hours, but then the other days you may have to work 4. Sometimes you have to work that late night or over the weekend if somebody's got a holiday, but if it needs to be done, it needs to be done.
I remember one time, it's probably been 10 years ago now, that we had to wait for freezing conditions, and it was a Saturday evening, but Jim said, if it gets cold enough, it freezes, he says, I'll be here. And I think we harvested till 3 o'clock on Sunday morning before we got that field done. But the guys were willing to come in, even though they'd had all day Saturday off because it was muddy, but it finally froze and we got the job done. And that's what it takes, is cooperation. That's the reason it's called Goodwine Co-op Grain Company.
Since we are a grain elevator, one of the issues that we always have are rodents. Years ago, we had an old fellow that used to service our scales. And in order to do that, he would have to climb underneath the scale into what we call a pit. Well, we had a groundhog that had moved in under the scale and taken over that space. And we forgot to tell this guy when he came to work on the scale. So he went in there to do his job, and he came out of there in a little while, and his eyes were about this big, and he said, "You're not going to believe what I saw." He said, "I just saw the biggest rat you have ever seen in your life." We had quite a good time laughing about that and talking about it.